The Old Dillard Foundation celebrates Florida Emancipation, which took place on May 20th, 1865, 11 days after the end of the Civil War, and 2 years after the proclamation was first issued by President Abraham Lincoln, who freed those enslaved in the southern states. In celebration of the Florida Emancipation, the Old Dillard Foundation presents George Gadson, a self-taught artist whose artworks express different spiritual aspects and values of life. His unabated passion for creating translates into exuberant and joyous figurative sculptures, abstracts, photography, and more. Inspired by his surroundings, people and their environment, and mundane objects of everyday life that often go unnoticed. George Gadson is one of South Florida's unsung heroes.
I am today who I am based upon where I came from. My mother was a maid. My mother did domestic work up, for years. And my dad was a welder, worked in the phosphate industry. George Gadson is a small town country boy. This statue pays tribute to Dr. Kathleen Wright. If you notice in the background of the building, the Broward County School Board building, the K.C. Wright Administration Center, Dr. Kathleen Wright was an educator. This statue is in tribute to her. She was actually the first African-American elected to the Broward County School Board and the first African-American woman, female, elected to any school board in the state of Florida. I went to Duke, which is a Baptist school. Graduated with my degree. I got my degree in theology. Went to become a Baptist minister. That didn't happen at the time. And I ended up going into the banking business. So when I graduated, about to graduate, I should say, and here I was with a degree in theology, I frankly didn't know who I was. And the last thing I wanted to do was to enter into a ministry as a preacher or what have you and not know who I was because of the lives that I would impact in a negative way because of not knowing who I was. So I went into banking, okay, which is what I was accustomed to. And while in the banking business, I was the only person of color in management. I felt like a fish in a fishbowl. All eyes are on me, waiting to see what I would do and how I would do what I would do. So to say the least, stress was very much a part of that whole scenario. So I decided that I needed a hobby to get away from the stress. So I worked in the bank during the day, and then I enrolled in an art class at Hillsborough Community College from 9 to 12 on a Saturday to learn how to paint and to relax. And I fell in love with it. The Urban League is an organization that does a tremendous amount of work here in the community, and their commitment is to equality for everybody. Knowing that they work with a variety of individuals, variety of families, ethnically diverse, which led me to create the work that depicted a family. There's the mother and daughter here, and then on the opposite side is the father, and the colors are not the same. So that was purposely done
so as to represent and show the diversity in terms of the families that they serve. The title of this sculpture is Equality.
So I moved to South Florida in 1988, still doing art as a hobby at that time. And an interesting thing happened. About a week after I moved here, I was living in Miami at the time. I had a painting stolen out of my apartment. A friend of mine, she and I had gone to the beach, and when we came back, and my apartment was on the 3rd floor.
Right.
So we came back and walked in, and I went, something is missing. And I turned around and looked, and this large painting I had done of a lady sitting on a bench, it's called Unspeakable Joy. It was stolen. Eventually, I replaced that space with another painting and began to dabble in sculpture. And my first sculpture was a paper mache. That's when I really got into sculpting. But I fine-tuned that process over time. And while I was involved in the business community, had been aware that the South Florida Super Bowl was actually looking for a gift to give to the NFL team owners for the 1995 Super Bowl. So I created a model, or it's called a maquette, of a kicker, and I did it in paper mache. Eventually, it was a gift given to all the NFL team owners, but it was done in bronze. So that was the beginning of my journey of how I got into sculpting.
You're looking at the Sancopa Monument, the Trailblazers of Broward County. They reached out to me and they spearheaded this project because they wanted to somehow capture, in a very capsule form, the history of Black Fort Lauderdale. The Sancopa bird is a symbol from the Ashanti people of Ghana, and it represents a positive reversion, meaning looking back in the past. And typically you see the Sancopa bird depicted with an egg in its mouth, and that represents basically the future. This monument is dedicated to those who made the significant contribution to the historic Fifth Avenue, the Sistrunk Corridor, and the entire city of Fort Lauderdale.
I was consulting with a couple. They were starting their own business, and I was telling them how I became an artist. And as I was sharing with them that, she says, "I think I have one of your paintings." I says, "Really?" So she starts describing it. She says, it's a woman sitting on the bench. She has this long dress on. She was describing the painting that was stolen. She didn't have the painting, because after that painting was stolen, I decided I would redo it. And of course, every painting, you can't duplicate the same painting, right, but I used the same subject matter. I knew she didn't have the original, but she had a print. So I said, "How did you come about this print?" She says, "Well, Mr. Gadson," she says, "about 15 years ago," she says, "I was on the streets doing drugs, alcohol," she says, "and I came down with the HIV virus." She says, "and a friend of mine invited me to a fundraiser that a nonprofit was having that was raising money for HIV cause, the HIV cause." She says, "and a friend of mine invited me." She says, "So I went." She says, "I didn't have much money." She said, "But you had donated this print to this nonprofit as a silent auction item." And she says, and the director came over to me and said she didn't care how much money I had, that it belonged. She says, "Here, this is for you." So she said she broke down and cried. And so 2 years ago, I had this discussion with this woman. Right. But 15 years ago, she had my print, and it changed her life. Every time I tell a story, I get a joy. So my point I'm making is, I was just being me, giving to the cause for silent auction, And God allowed me, many, many years later, to meet a woman, total stranger, who has my print. And today, she's happily married. She loves God. She and her husband. So that's really what I'm trying to say, that when people get my work, they feel some part of me, and God willing, it changes their life.
This particular sculpture is called the Bridge. Actually, it was done and installed 2 days before the opening of the African American Research Library and Culture Center in 2002. So once I got the green light, if you will, to create the work, I met with Sam Morrison, and I wanted him to give me what his thoughts were as it relates to the sculpture and what he wanted the sculpture to represent. So he said, George, he sees the African American Research Library and Culture Center as being a bridge that connects Fort Lauderdale, if you will, the African American Research Library, specifically with relationships in Africa. So this bridge would represent 5 different areas: education, but at the same time, the outline of America, the United States. So geography was the second bridge. And here is a Maasai woman from the Maasai tribe here at the top. The next bridge was technology. I used the mouse, which we all are very familiar with as we work with our computers, and the E, of course, standing for e-commerce, when businesses are doing business. The third one is culture. Culture represented here with the ballerina shoe, the ballet, the dancer, the paintbrush for artists who actually paint, and then of course for music, the treble clef here representing culture. Economics, the downtown representation of the downtown skyline, if you will, of the skyscrapers, being the other business commerce, again, between us here and folks in Africa. The very prominent image of this sculpture is the Adinkra symbol. Now, this Adinkra symbol has a meaning which is represented here on the sculpture. It means wisdom, learning, strength, and humility.
I have come to know that I was not brought into this earth to breathe air alone. That the gift that I have is a gift that He helped me discover. And that gift is a gift that I don't take for granted. So I take that gift now, and it's part of giving and going and changing lives in communities, changing lives of students, adults, and helping them discover possibly something about themselves that they didn't know that they had. Through my art, I believe that I've changed lives and changed communities. No, I don't have a church. No, I don't have a congregation. What I'm doing with my art, that is my ministry.